Det deilig nerdete dette programmet I dag, og kanskje de som ikke så drevne inn plan, lurer kanskje på hvorfor det en helt egen bolk om strategisk planlegging av undergrunn, som går enda mer spesifikt inn på det som Elin har snakket om nå. Men det egentlig ikke så rart. For det første det ikke så rart at vi ikke tenker så mye på det, fordi det skjer under bakken. Men det en problemstilling som har dukket opp særlig etter at så mye av planleggingen dreier seg om fortetting og transformasjon, som Mario sa innledningsvis. Og rent sånn eiendomsmessig så det vel juridisk sett ganske sånn uavklart hvor langt ned eiendommen din stikker. Sånn at det kan skje ganske kjapt at noen kjøper opp eiendommen under tomta di, og så finner du at du ikke en eiendomsbesitter, du bare en overflateeier, som det heter I loven. Og etter hvert som teknologien utvikler seg, før var det kanskje mer snakk om det kom en tunnel eller en T-bane eller noe vann under tomta di, men stadig mer teknologi legges jo under bakken, stadig flere områder transformeres og oppgraderes teknisk, utfordringer knyttet til vannhåndtering spesielt, gjør at undergrunnen nøkkel I planlegging, og det ligger veldig mange latente konflikter, men også en del potensialer som kanskje underutnyttet for bruk av undergrunnen I planleggingen. Og vi har 3 stykker som skal snakke om dette. Vi skal begynne med professor på AHO, Karin Helms, som også president I International Federation of Landscape Architects, har jobbet på arkitektskolen I Versailles, og har også arbeidet I mange år som rådgiver på landskapssiden for en rekke regioner I Frankrike. Hun opptatt av de storskala landskapsprosjektene, og ikke minst landskapsprosessene, har vært engasjert, ikke minst gjennom doktorgradsarbeidet sitt, med brukermedvirkningsprosesser knyttet til det. Hun skal snakke om the underground as precondition. Hun tar det på engelsk. Kunne tatt det på både italiensk og fransk og dansk, vet jeg. Men vi tar det på engelsk I dag. Velkommen, Karin. Eller tysk.
Takk.
Tysk I pausen.
Takk. Ja, tusind tak. I dag bliver jeg igen nødt til at tale på engelsk. Det der med at tale skandinavisk, det kommer. Det skal nok komme. Jeg har brug for lidt mere forberedelse, tror jeg, hvis jeg skal gøre det. Men det kommer. Ja. Så jeg lige prøver. Ja, det dur. Så rigtig nok, tusind tak for indbydelser. Det ikke, I will take it over to English. This will not be scientific or linked to laws or rules. It is an understanding, maybe more poetic, about the underground as a precondition to work as a landscape architect on our large-scale territories or urban territories. And indeed, thank you for the introduction. I will indeed make examples linked to my role as a landscape state advisor in France. And yes, and before I have to say I'm past president of IFLA Europe. IFLA World is James Hayter, Australian landscape architect, and I stopped my mandate last week. But now I'm 1 year past president, so I still need to work a little bit. But thank you so much. So what I'm going to is 4 chapters. Is how a landscape architect can read the landscape and try to understand the underframe, or what we name underframe, our understanding or our guess about what is happening underneath. This is quite important for a landscape architect because it's linked to the geology, linked to the geography and the land use, and this means the living who's above it. The living is obviously the humans, but for landscape architects, it's also so important to understand the plants and the habitat for all type of living animals. My experience is state landscape architect, and then my understanding, or the understanding of more urban planner in the Helsinki case study, and then an example of larger projects linked to our topic. So this is in general my fascination. Since ever, it is to understand what can the underground tell us about our land. And here is from in Jylland, in northern Denmark, the last ice age period and the crack you can have on the land when you have very dry summers. For me, this is obviously a source of ideas for a new planning, or it tells us something about the memory of the land. And again, in Jylland, you have more of this witch lines, as they call them, in the fields. And obviously, it's not a witch. It's just because we have in this area where the crops are growing less fertile topsoil, who do not allow the crops to mature. And when we make a little section of it, we understand that this is probably a former canal at the time of the Vikings, and means that with the time it's been filled in with sand, because these canals were very close to the coast, and with the wind is filled in. So it's interesting to see all these memories of past users who still are alive, and we can maybe do something with them. How do I, or many landscape architects, read the landscape? In general, this is through a simplification of the understanding of it. This means many landscape architects has passed in biology, in geography, or in geology, but most of them have understandings of what is happening in this type of large landscape, and translate this over to simple plans to share this with others. And for instance, this one where I've been landscape state advisor in Normandy and Upper Normandy, this type of landscape, well, the question was here where to build windmills, but I'm not going into the topic. But my understanding of it is that I can redraw it, reinterpret it, make it simple. What is the landscape structures of it, so that everybody can share this when we discuss with the locals, with the local community, what is so specific in their landscape. But we can also, looking at the plants, guess what is happening underneath. We can understand that this is thanks to the plants who are growing here, that this is a Jurassic period, and we can guess that the Prunus spinosa and Sambucus, oh, okay, they will grow very quickly. So what it will be, how can we anticipate the long term? And the Fagus salvifica, well, they will take their time, but they will be very huge. So we can sort of guess what is underneath just by reading the type of plants who are growing there. And the use who has been done, the grass was on the clay or the sand layer. So this is a sort of X-ray we do in a simple way. It's not very scientific, but it is our first reading of a landscape. And here I can give you a little example. When I was state advisor in this region, we are along the Seine River. Paris is over here, and Le Havre is over there. And along the meadows of the Seine, there's a district called Mailleret-sur-Seine, where there was a demand for a new urban expansion, new houses, and also a supermarket. So there I arrived as a landscape advisor because they were questioning if this was a good idea or not. So that was their demand, new housing. But coming to the area, I could notice that the city center, there's a pointer, okay, that the city center of this little town is very green and very wet. I was there in autumn, so okay, very wet. And on the land, who's on quite a slope, here too, everything was very, very wet. There was drainage everywhere, and the proposed houses would be in wood. So there was something about, shouldn't we pay attention? It's so wet in this area. But where does this wetness come from? All over, and the outlet is a forest, and the Seine has been canalized more times. So it's maybe not exactly where it should be, but it's been very canalized with concrete banks. But they told me it's very wet in the center and the water comes from underneath. Should we build it here? So my understanding is that I look at the land register, and it gives us a lot of information of past uses or how it's framed. But this little town has this urban expansion, very strange. Looking more to it, I could quite guess that there must be something, because when we look at this form of the meadow, of the meander of the Seine, there must be something. So just looking at the geology, we can understand it. Actually, it was a former meander of the Seine. It was like this. So at geologic time, it did have another way, and today it is shortcut here. And there was even another river coming into the Seine here. But this has been forgotten by everybody. The mayors, the locals didn't know this. So build here, we can do it on the slope, but maybe the last houses, we should not put them because they will be one day flooded. So this could be done by everybody, but it's more me as an urban planner, an architect, or a landscape architect as advisor, who try to remind them the memory of the soil, the memory of the ground and the underground, that they should pay attention of before they decide to build new houses. So for me, it has always been interesting to see, and this is pictures I share in general with my husband, by the way, so I see you use the same one. We like the intelligence of the past, at the time where we could not fight against nature. We had to do with the nature, how people had settled, paying attention of the movement of the soil, of the sea, observed it more times before settling. How we are in Vézelay, all French examples, sorry for this. How they had settled at the top of the hill where there was rocks on the top, and preserved the fields. Obviously, there are more reasons why you settle at the top, also for strategic and the view, and at the time of local wars. But here we have a lot of rocks up here, so we don't spoil the agriculture land who gives us food to build on it. But in historical understanding too, we can see how they have been intelligent in using the underground. The Parc de Sceaux in south of Paris, from André Lenôtre, who is the designer and the gardener also of Versailles, the Park of Versailles. He did a major park here in Sceaux, and we can see how he has been intelligent in using the geologic understanding of it, and use the water, the small water run, to install his magnificent canal, and how this garden has two axes. One is here at the plateau, and one is down in the valley. So it's sort of echo of what the soil condition, the ground condition can give us to build quite impressive projects who will last. Maybe this is the most important. We want them to last. So there's many people who say that they disagree with this poetic section of New York, but we can at least at the time where there were less money, or the engineers in the beginning of the first skyscrapers, at least they built in Manhattan where the bedrock was the highest, and lower buildings where it was lower. And again, you have Central Park, where the bedrock is again lower. Maybe there was a link to this bedrock. Obviously, the engineers can find solution to go against this, or the money will also help to find tricks to go against it. But obviously, when we look at it today, well, there are skyscrapers, and most skyscrapers where the bedrock is very high. So it is also easier to build in these conditions. And I teach and soil students. I think you have already seen these pictures last month, because I like to tell the story about the park system. It was started by Fredrik Olmsted in the US, in Boston, linked to more and more rapid urban expansion, and how to anticipate the coming of more and more immigrants, and reserve places for the recreative, but also to have, it was linked to also health, have the rivers as being for the promenade, park and promenade, and the muddy rivers, turn them over so that they are more nice and you can walk a bit along them. In Boston, we all know this neglectless park system, where we have more parks one after the other along a river. So when he wrote this about the park system, it went over in, so it's, we are back in the end of 1898. When he wrote this, it came back to Europe and was interpreted differently in the different countries. You have obviously Harald Hald, who gave a very good example in the 30s on how the park system could be used here in Oslo. But when we look at the case of Helsinki, I think this is one interesting case, because it's really linked with the underground condition. We have this in the contemporary park system. We have all these many parks. They are in the planning system of for Helsinki since very long time, since 1976. Been revised more times. The last revision was in 2012. And what do we learn from this? Actually, we learn from how they first settled. Helsinki was not the initially capital of Finland. It was Turku, as you all know, but this was a fisherman area. And the first settlement here was proposed in an area where it was naturally protected by the water, on a very high rock system, a hill. And most of the rocks here around has been then later by little settled for the urban. There was a tradition, and there still is in Finland, in the rural, but also in the forest, that you build on the rock and you pay attention to not be built on the peat. The peat is everywhere here. There's not only clay, but peat, who is unstable, as we know. And the way was also you build your farm on the rock because we need the poor. There's very little land for farming, and this land has to be preserved against housing. We need to feed the people. There's only 2% agriculture in Finland, so we have to pay very attention and not spoil it with houses. That was a sort of rural understanding who was then used here also for the urban. So built on rocks to stay stabilized, but also because there's a lot of peat, but also not spoil the little land who's left for the food. So we have more expansion. Ehrenström, the Swedish, and Engel, the German, looked at the expansion of it. But now comes what I'm more pointing on. We are in this period of the industrial period. This means trains. The new train is coming, and we are coming to here with this Berliner architect Bertil Jung, who proposed a park. We are in the period of the inherited from the Romantic period. This means with the idea that we have an idea of nature. This is then the heritage of these forms of the park. And looking more closer to it, we can see it is along the railway station, but also this former fjord who now becomes a lake because there's a dam here, a bridge for the railway, and it goes up and up. It was called Central Park, obviously in memory of New York Central Park of Frederick Olmsted. So it was fully aligned with the example of this park done 30 years before Helsinki Park. Grüne Hinde, yeah. But later came somebody, very well-known Eli Saarinen, architect, who made a whole plan, a proposal for the whole area, and who's very well known for this name of the plan, who's called the archipelago. And archipelago obviously come from what is so specific, all this archipelago along the coast. And as he said, there's 3 types of archipelago: the outgrid archipelago, the defensive one, and the inner archipelago. And then he proposed the archipelago for the urban. And he used the park, Central Park, as the first starting system, who was then done some years before by Bertil Jung, with whom he also met and worked with, and proposed others. Others here along a very well-known river, who was actually Vatanen, the river who was the first settlement, by the way, for the fishermen. And then he proposed others here. Some of them are linked to water run, but the others know is the topography or the underframe where you cannot build. This plan has been very successful until the moment where the town needed to expand more and decided to all the east-west links should not be maintained, which is probably a pity. But that was one of the evolution of this plan. Because what remained is this, the 7 lines here, we can see just inherited from Eli Saarinen's plan and from Bertil Jung here. So what is there underneath here? So underneath this, if we look at the geologic plans of the map of Helsinki, actually, it's this one. It's the light blue here. This is peat. So it's a bit difficult to see the and I try to overlap them, but you can nearly not see the other map of the city. But actually, they didn't build on the peat. It's movable, and it's also coming up. And this is il respire en français, on dit. It's a breathing with more water or less water. So this is really dangerous to build on this. And if we go even further down, we can see the clay. And here we can also see that, yes, there's some clay here. So ding, ding. So maybe these areas are very unstable in the deep layer. So, but what we can see is that they followed the plants. And the biggest buildings are here in the south. It's also the city center. And the less dense is more and more we come out to the outlet, as most of our towns in Europe. Same system. But what is remarkable that there is still the memory of this system. Today, the plant has moved, and what is quite impressive is that if Central Park now hosts more and more equipment. In '58, it was the Olympic, where all the stadium was, but it put on the side, so they did pay attention on where they were building. But what we can see, the latest, was that they understood that there was an impact also in the sea. This means along the river, the quality of the water is also linked to what's happening out here. So they removed all the port activities here, moved to Warsari on the left side. This means from a park system in 1995, as most Europeans and also linked to the different laws, it went over to what we call the green and blue infrastructure. Green and blue infrastructure is more there for ecologic reasons, no more as the park system for humans, but well, can be for both. But this means that the ecologic system has inherited from the park system and make it evolve. Yes, and some pictures with some students from Versailles, but here we are in the Helsinki Park. This means this one, who's along a big river. Yes, and how that looks like in the middle of the town, quite similar to your marker. So, and one important thing is that they found also out that this system can only work if it is more or less, not less than 300 meters wide. Otherwise, it's no more what we can call a forest. It needs to be suddenly recreative. Obviously, this measure of 300 meters is linked to this type of soil and this climate, but it can indicate us something that we should not transpose directly over to elsewhere, because it depends on the soil, the climate. But it means that this type of park system or green infrastructure works as natural if they have a certain scale. If it's smaller, then it becomes is needed to have maintenance as a park, and have it becomes really recreative and no more with a biologic system. This means that if I take the parallel, for instance, we are working at Aarhus with students on Romsøs, and there's an inner park, and we can see that there's a lack of cycle of plants. There's no new plants. We have the old trees who are there, but we don't have the underlay of plants. And it is the same rock, the same soil than the Lilomarka, but it doesn't work. So we have to help this forest because it's a little bit too small. So peat underneath, don't build on it. Yes, and that's the end of in Vuosaari, the end of the planning or of the area. And yes, and this is on the coast, the inner what's called inner fjord, where there was before industrial area of this very famous ceramic that maybe you all know. It's been transformed over to housing area. Yes. So this is a very, you know this much better than me, because here in Oslo, you have turned over many rivers. You have opened them up in Oslo, a huge project to give back place to nature. It can help against the flood, obviously, but it is also our memory of our place, the memory of the identity of your town. And when I was young, I did projects without any budget, very low budgets. It's in general, it's €2 per square meters. I've done that many times. You nearly don't survive in your office, only if you have 10 projects, then it's okay. But you work in the rural, which is interesting. There's a lack of landscape architects in general, or designers, architects, urban planner in the rural. We need also to invest these areas. And this was a little town. Now in France, we have 36,000 mayors, 36,000 districts. More presidents have tried to bring them together, many tricks. So there's planning for larger entities, but we still have the 36,000 mayors. This means decisioners. On dit des coqs en français. Yes. So this is one of them. They had in the center of France, Saint-Vaury, maybe where there's a huge decrease of population in the center of France. But this little village or town had an old town on a little slope, a very slight slope, and the urban expansion was another little slope. And in the middle, he has built more and more activities since the 70s for sport activities or dance or community buildings. And there was a field here in the back where he asked me, we want to build new houses, social houses, individual social houses to attract young families, because there's a lack of population and we don't want our schools to close. So that's their policy. But looking at this little place here, where should we build? Actually, I saw this immense parking, lot of asphalt with no cars, or only when there's events. Can we do something more than just show him where we should build? And I couldn't guess that was probably here a little river before. There's indeed in a pipe, typical. So how to, we cannot reopen it, he said to me, because they're afraid of the flood. But we can at least show where, it's very blurred, the images. Sorry for that. But we can at least show it and try to find again the orientation. This means the under frame of this little river, give again a new orientation for the whole area. So I was asked where to build. They can build here on both sides and have something in central. I haven't named this Central Park. That would be too pretentious, but give some centrality to it so that we can go from the church to the activities and then to the housing. But this is just by looking on where the former river was, who's still in the pipe unfortunately, but it can give orientation, even with 2 euros per square meter. But now I will take a project who is from Agence Terre, from my husband's firm, who's maybe more symbolic about what we can do with the understanding of the geology to orientate and give new identity for a place, revealing the geology and the geography. This is a project done in 2000, so a long time ago, but you can still look on internet and find it. In Bad Oeynhausen. Bad Oeynhausen is west from Hanover in Germany. There is in Germany something I think is very interesting, which could maybe for the urbanist be another talk. It is what they call the IGA, the BUGA, the Gartenlandschau, or the BUGA. Yes, all these fairs are events they do either every 10 years when it is at the level of the state, at the level of region is every 2 years, and it is a garden exposition or an urban exposition. But in general, I'm talking as a landscape architect, is a garden exposition, London Gartenschau, for instance, or Buga, when it's at the scale of to region, to Linda. It is an exposition during 6 months, a fair, where there's an exposition of all the nursery, the new flowers with a lot of colors, all the objects for the town, all the furniture for the town. And during 6 months is a fair whose close you have to pay to get in, but it is also a moment of not only exposition, but also parties and light restaurants. It is a place where people come from far away, not only locals, but to see this event, garden event. But in the back of this exposition, of this fair, actually, it is a long-term urban planning. This means it's paid by all these expositions, nurseries and others. You have even, a church material or furniture, everything you can imagine linked to the public space. So they pay for the exposition. Obviously, the city is engaged. In general, it's in between 2 cities that this happens, so that it can be sponsored, also granted by the region, the Linda. And it means that when the fair is finished, when they take away, well, what remains is the paths, the roads, the landscape structures, the main trees, who can orientate for future management or for a future park or future urban planning. So this means that when the town decides to do this, there's a huge effort for them to plan actually 2 activities, the short term and the long term, together with the designer they have decided to work with. So a huge effort. In general, it takes more years to plan this so that it is successful. And this, in this town here, what was so specific, it's Bad Oeynhausen is as the wording says, is a spa area. But unfortunately, yes, it was a spa. A part of the town has been bombed in World War II. So a lot of the new spas, well, they have this after World War II buildings where you don't see the water, only if you are using the spa, you can see the water. But in general, what has been done in the 1900s, this means a town with the nice buildings with outdoor fountains, where you can come and see and touch the water, the underground water. This is a little bit lost. This is mainly the last building where you can see it. In many of the buildings, actually, in the public space, you don't see this specific water who is under Bad Oeynhausen. So the geologic fault is underneath the town, obviously, and exactly as in this drawing, it's in two lines like this, and one is here, and the other one is here. This is the river Vere, and there's another one in Weser, the two rivers. But there are two geologic faults who cross the whole system, and all the spa areas, this is the building I just showed you, they are along this fault, obviously. Here there's another spa area, there. And they pump the water from underneath. Actually, there's two waters. One is very salty, and you have the impression that you are at the sea when you smell it. And the other one is as eggs who are passed away. So maybe if you have to open the idea of having a Landesgartenschau was more to use the water who is iodé, you say in French, with the salt air. So you have the impression of being a little excursion to the sea, to the coast, and you can breathe this. It's good for your lungs. So the idea of the project was to take this fault and who's already opened some areas, and all this area was then open for the exposition area. One part, or this one, was in Bad Oeynhausen, and this area with the fields here is in Löhne, which is the other town. If this is bourgeois area with the spa, Löhne is an industrial area specialized in reparation of tracks. And they wanted to maintain the fields, so it's been more how to have, in 2000 it was already interesting to show an ecologic way of farming, have fields who are with less monoculture. So they wanted more an exposition linked to farming, and Bad Oeynhausen was asking himself how to finish the town. There's some houses here, there's some houses here. How to finish this edge of the town of Bad Oeynhausen. So the fair was the mediator to organize this, and it is the water, the geologic water, who is the thematic of the whole area. So the paths and all the paths who are proposed. Here it is after the fair, but you can imagine here you had all the nursery and flowers. But after the fair, what remains is the path who can be widened if it becomes a street, or diminished if it's just a bicycle or a pedestrian lane. But this means they inherit of these willows as an alley. They have now small bridges above the wetland. They have other type of paths who is showing in a symbolic way the geologic fault. This means where is this water underneath, so you can follow it in the wet forest edge. And they have more spectacular elements. the water who's in a fountain system. Well, there's not so much salt as you can understand. And this was the fields with the more organic and the flower fields for the show, the fair. But now I come to the real subject of today. This means the underframe. How to show the water who's 25 meters under your feet and reveal it in the public space. So that is what they propose at the Agence d'Air. So the first thing was that they propose a sunken garden of 5 meters open for everybody, and then a spectacular way down in the earth to try to be closer to this water, this spa water. So the real system is that the water is comes up. Actually, the pressure is automatic. There's nothing to do, but it is stored here. And once the storage is full, it goes up as a geyser. So there's some control of it in this part here. So it's quite warm. So when you go down, you're all wet. Not only if you receive the water. So the sunken garden with the idea that you are in a lower layer protected by the wind. And the idea is that around here you can start to urbanize after the fair. Little promenade. And these ladies are waiting for the water to be filled in the container and to have this effect, which is the happening of the whole park, or even today for the whole district. So it's not only for the locals, it attracts obviously people from the whole region. Yes. So during the fair, we had this type of clothes, but obviously today you just go down and you know that you will be wet. And that's the kids love this. So what is the long term is obviously that these strips has organized the long-term urban planning. All the light green is where you can build. Where you cannot build is all these wetlands who are protected, by the way. And the area is linked to this path who is above the geologic fault. Maya, I think I haven't put more illustrations, but I'm very pleased to answer to questions. It went a little bit faster than what I thought. So the underframe as a revealer for new projects, maybe they are poetic, but it is a way for landscape architect to act. It is maybe not scientific, but it is at least giving a stronger identity to a place. I think that the park system in Helsinki was very important and an important lesson for all of us. Don't build on the peat. They have done the same in Otaniemi, by the way. And how can we again give more space to the urban, to these type of soil and underground, so that we don't masquer, we don't erase the specificity of the ground, of the underground. It remains the identity of our places. Voilà.
Thank you. Thank you, Karin. It's a beautiful project. I love how it's anchored so deeply into the ground. And it strikes me somehow that both Elin and your lecture really, from very different angles, accentuate the facts on the ground, the kind of morphological and deep morphological matters of a site, of a specific case study, in order to extract knowledge to do projects, make laws, take political decisions. That also showcases kind of one of the core issues we are dealing with at AO, kind of the physical form of the city and of the landscape, both above and underneath the ground. I think it's also very fascinating in that regards, your term, the intelligence of the past. Somehow we have had, or frequently has, larger and smaller disasters based on people building on land that has never been built on before, that is based on knowledge that throughout the last century has been forgotten, like the tsunami in a way. Knowledge that had been passed on for generation is suddenly organized in a new network framework of knowledge in law, and then you forget what you always have known. And I just wondered, in regards to your work in France, as you have been collaborating a lot with different regions, is there a formalized, I guess there must be basic geological surveys into a site, but
that is a very good question. Actually, when I came here to Norway, I was very surprised by the importance of NGI, the geology, and I really do understand it, and it is missing in France. That's why somebody as me, landscape architect, pick out these plans of the geology to show to the mayors, but also to the local governors of the provinces and region, because they have forgotten them. In France, we are, 70% of the land is agriculture. So there's a lot of laws to help farmers, to protect them, and even if I think it's only 10% of our economy, but it is our identity. And the geology is not enough revealed, which is quite strange, because we have a lot of different bedrocks in France, a lot of different regions, different what you call landscape entities, is very diverse from north to south of France. And we have, as here, flood, landslide, and so on. And the geographer are not enough. But if you look at the landscape architects or other urban planner, many of them did take a first course in biology or in geography. Most of the landscape architect, before becoming landscape architect, very strangely, they're not, after the A level, they don't go directly to be a landscape architect. In general, I think it's up to 75% goes first for another course at a bachelor and start this type of courses. And therefore, I think that the landscape architect in France have, in a poetic way, not in a scientific way, an understanding of what we call the underframe. We don't dare to call it more than that. But geologists, yes, we need them, because we, similar to Norway, has a very important geologic different type of grounds, and we have a lot of accidents. Yes. So they should, it's a profession who should be raised in France. It's not the case today.
No, it's really interesting that it's kind of a design-based approach that lead to scientific results inherently, in a way enough. You can also, of course, we saw the Manhattan section, but you can see it downtown Oslo, also where the bedrock is closer to the surface. That's where you have the plaza and Posthuset. Today, that's for practical and economical reasons, but it's also extremely interesting to discuss this design approach in a more strategic perspective than also in terms of long run or long term planning, as we're discussing today. Is this where is this section from? Is it something you have made, or?
No, it's an artist who done this. There's I apologize, I haven't put the source, but here it is. Yes. It is an interpretation of the bedrock, obviously, as you can see. But if you, I found a geologic map of it, but it was only half of Manhattan, so I didn't put it in because it was strange. There wasn't the lost part. But even the metro in New York here, it was really difficult to build it in south of Manhattan due to the very dense bedrock here in granite. So they have suffered the machines to do the metro down here in downtown. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Karin.
You're welcome.